Hello, everyone out there. This is Matt Rizzetta, the CEO of N6A, here again for our latest episode of Outcomes and Omelettes, where we meet each month with different leaders from the worlds of business, media, and philanthropy. I am super excited to have this month's guest with us today, my good friend Keenan Beasley. Hey, Keenan, how you doing? So Keenan, super pumped to be talking today. Let me just, for the audience out there who might not know who Keenan is, let me give Keenan, let me just go over Keenan's background, and then we're going to get into the questions. So Keenan is a true pioneer and visionary in many ways. He's someone who I've been fortunate enough to get to know on an entrepreneurial level over the past several years. Keenan is a very successful entrepreneur who has founded, built, and sold multiple companies. His background spans many sectors, including technology, art and creative services, marketing, retail, CPG, among many others. Keenan is also a contributor to Forbes, CNBC, and he serves as an advisor to many, many startups, as well as being a regular lecturer at the USC Marshall School of Business. Real quick, I first met Keenan when he was building BLKBOX, which was really ahead of its time as one of the first digital analytics and marketing startups, which later had a very successful exit. And then since then, Keenan hasn't slowed down one bit. In addition to being involved in many startups, he's also done some incredible work to give back to the entrepreneurial community and future generations of entrepreneurs, which we're going to talk a lot about today. Keenan founded Venture Noire, which we're super proud to be a partner with of here at N6A. Venture Noire was one of the first nonprofits that focused on providing programming, resources, networking, capital opportunities to the community of entrepreneurs of color who have long been underrepresented in those areas. And since its inception, Venture Noire has provided more than 1,000 entrepreneurs of color with non-dilutive grants, mentorship, training, and it's enabled them to launch and scale very successful businesses via their networking events, fundraising initiatives, educational workshops, pitch competitions, and all sorts of other interactive content. Keenan also is very involved as a founder, as an advisor, as an investor, and even an operator in some cases in many other businesses, including Supply Factory brands, Ncaa, and Infinite Looks and others. Keenan started his career, which we'll talk about in a minute, as a brand manager for P&G, Procter Gamble. He was also a Division I football player at West Point, so don't try to carry the ball up the middle against him. We'll crush Keenan, great to see you, my man, and really looking forward to this conversation.
No, thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it. And definitely on the football, I may have one good play left in me, so that's about it. That's about all I got.
All right, so Keenan, let's get right into it. We have a lot of ground to cover over the next 40 minutes or so. Let's kind of go back to where it all started first. Maybe you could just tell our audience a little bit about where you grew up and what childhood was like and how that shaped you into the entrepreneur and the man that you are today.
Yeah, so grew up in Southern California, so Los Angeles area. Grew up playing sports my whole life, so both my parents are athletes, kind of raised me in that, but it was always a dual focus on both athletics and academics. I think the big thing that my parents instilled in me and something that carried forward all the way to my decision to go to West Point was just the focus on service, right? So we've always done things to give back to the community at large, whether it was through church or, feeding the homeless for Thanksgiving every year that my family has done. So, my parents are huge in that and the philanthropic side, but just ultimately thinking of society in a group-like manner, right? So it was always about the greater good. And that's how they raised me. That's how my sister is, my niece and nephew, that's just ingrained in my family. So from there, playing football, I had about, oddly enough, I don't know, I think I was just a big kid, so I got a lot of football scholarships to various places. So I ended up going to West Point to play football, but mostly because, that's a triple threat institution, right? It's a unique balance where you have this incredible historical leadership institution. It's over 200 years old and produced some of the most respected leaders globally. But then you have one of the best academic institutions in the world. And you take that, and oh, by the way, you get to play football against some of the greatest teams in the country. So I was really fortunate to get selected to go there and go through the process. And really that is what prompted my desire to continue a mission of service. So everything that I've done has been focused on serving others. And it's actually a really easy thing for me to do because it takes all the pressure off of me and removes any sense of ego. It's always about serving the greater good of others. And so I've continued that on through my career, and why I ended up at a company like Procter Gamble, which I think is one of the best in the world. And, they have a saying of consumer is boss, but that mentality is always around serving the public and making and improving lives, and something that resonated with me and that I carry forward even in the companies that I'm starting now.
Awesome. Great stuff, Keenan. I think you hit on a really important topic, which is the topic of servant leadership, right? And just in your journey as an entrepreneur, and your journey as a leader, can you just talk a little bit about how important you think it is to lead, through the lens of serving others, and, how that's kind of shaped not only you as a leader, but a lot of the people that you've led in the companies, many of which you've had very successful exits for?
Yeah, I think for me, it's always the journey as an entrepreneur, because there's a couple things that you have to uncover, right? One, you have to get over and find your confidence, right? Just the confidence to pitch and put yourself out there, and oftentimes be rejected, right? And fail, right? And it's humbling. It's a difficult journey. So you're constantly in this battle to find your confidence. But what happens in that is you have to be careful, because you don't want to allow your ego to get into it. Because the reality of whatever you're building is not about you, right? It's ultimately validated by others. And it starts at the very beginning, right? You don't set the valuation of your company. An investor does, right? They provide the term sheet. You provide the case in the background, but it's not in your control. Your company is worth what somebody's willing to pay for. And so very early on, you find that confidence, but you strike the balance of how you know that you're always working for others. And I've taken that approach within my teams, because I can't build the company. I can help shape and set the vision for the company, but they're going to ultimately build it. They're going to build and set and create the culture. And so I've always taken the approach that I work for my teams. And so my job is to really, in some ways, if you use a football analogy, right, just kind of remove barriers, right, and kind of serve as an offensive lineman, right, a blocker for them, so that they can run the best plays possible. And that's what I've taken the approach on throughout my career, and everything that I do.
Awesome. That's great, Keenan. Let me ask you a question on that topic too, Keenan. How do you approach the topic of recruiting? Because when you're talking about such an important leadership skill, right, which is servant leadership and leading through the lens of serving others, but that also has to be reciprocal in some cases, where you need to be leading people, who are passionate about the company and, who are giving back just as much as they're receiving. So how do you sort of balance that when you're looking at, people with whom you want to work and people who you're looking to recruit to join your teams?
Because I'm an early stage venture builder, right? So I'm not at the point where I have, hundreds and thousands of employees and people in the organization. So I've been very focused on network. So everyone that I've been, fortunate enough to work around has been through my network, right? Let's say one or two people removed. And really what I'm looking for on that is I hire almost exclusively based off of passion and curiosity. Because a lot of what you're doing as an entrepreneur is learning, right? We're all learning every day. I mean, I'm learning, I learned so much from you just in, I'll never forget when you started talking about credibility assets, right? And things of that nature. So I'm picking up stuff and learning along this journey, on a daily basis. And so is my team. But what's going to separate us to make us more successful is our drive, right? That desire to continuously learn, right? To be curious, but to be passionate around solving problems and serving the people that we're serving. And that is exclusively what I hire based off of. And so that comes with, recommendations from people in the network as I'm looking to fill certain roles. And then as we scale and grow in different organizations, you'll try to work with recruiters and other, networks that have that same philosophy and mentality to kind of cast a wider net. But at this point right now, I absolutely love working with people that are just passionate, curious, and are within the network. That's a trusted group for me.
Totally. Totally. Yeah, Keenan, I get calls every day from entrepreneurs who tell me they learned so much from me. They say, "Thank God, Matt, you made all those mistakes. Now I know what mistakes not to make when I start my companies."
That's the beauty of it. That's the power of the ecosystem right there.
Yeah. All right, so Keenan, let's fast forward now. Obviously, something we're super passionate about at N6A, and we're very proud to be partnering with you on this journey that you started at Venture Noire. Maybe you could just talk to us a little bit about what Venture Noire is, how you came about the idea of founding an organization like that. And then we'll talk about some of sort of the broader, social issues that right now are probably more relevant than they've ever been before as it relates to the cause and the mission that Venture Noire is focused on solving.
Yeah, Venture Noire is an extreme passion of mine, but also like extremely therapeutic in ways. I tell people you want to solve some of your own problems, like start helping other people.
Yeah, it's true.
It's a great way to work through it. But, for me, Venture Noire really came out of the fact that as an entrepreneur and building a business, especially when I was at Black Box, it's a lonely process at times, especially in New York. New York is what I call the busiest, loneliest place on the planet. Right? There's, you can walk by 1 million people and no one will speak to you, right, in a day. And as an entrepreneur, you become isolated, especially as I was coming out of corporate, where you were surrounded by these teams. And now all of a sudden you're on an island by yourself, at least how it feels. So for me, what I was looking for was to create an ecosystem of people that were like-minded, that were going through the same process and journey as me. And so the real creation of Venture Noire was at my apartment, right? I just said, hey, I'm going to do an impromptu happy hour with entrepreneurs. Come, I put it on Instagram, show up if you'd like, I'll cook, bring a drink and let's, just converse. I did that and about, 70 people showed up.
Wow.
And all entrepreneurs, and we all had very similar struggles. And I realized that there was a chance to create an ecosystem for entrepreneurs of color so that we can, one, start to build the confidence in each other. And I'm a firm believer that success begets success. So the better your companies do, Matt, the more encouraged I am, the better mine actually do, right? I can draft off of your wins, just like I can also learn from some of your mistakes and vice versa. So the starting point of Venture Noire was to create that ecosystem. Now it has kind of evolved where as you're building the ecosystem, you start to understand the gaps that entrepreneurs are having, especially at the earlier stages. And one of them is really it's resources, but it is in the education. It's really in the curriculum, the know-how, because those early stage costs, they start to go away as you scale. That's why when you find an entrepreneur, they've done one business, they can do 5 because they can now alleviate a lot of those early stage costs of how to get the business formed. They now have a network of a legal team, an accountant. They know who to rely on, who to go to. They get their process down. And so a lot of what we're doing at Venture Noire is starting to create that template to democratize the startup process for entrepreneurs of color.
Great. Keenan, and I know you and I have we've talked a lot offline about this, particularly over the past several months, but for some of our audience who might not be as familiar with just how dramatic and how deeply rooted these problems and challenges are when it comes to access to capital and relationships and content and a lot of the things you were just talking about, specifically for entrepreneurs of color. Can you just share a little bit about, your experience as an entrepreneur of color yourself and just how challenging it is? I don't think the audience, most people don't quite grasp just how drastic the disparity is between those who are entrepreneurs of color and those who aren't.
Yeah, it comes down to what type of business you're creating, right? Because different businesses have different startup costs. I think the world now is obsessed with tech and going into that space. But to build a tech company is a capital intensive business. Sure. It has extremely high startup costs, which means that you either have to have enough money initially to start that or the ability to go and get outside capital. Well, to have enough money, that means you have to have a basis of wealth. Well, we know that starting point, there's huge disparities in this country. Sure. Average Black family, net worth of $17,000, average white family, $70,000 plus. So now we're talking about a business that has a startup cost of $25,000. Well, clear gap. You're going to have far fewer Black founders being able to do that self-funded. So then you're going to have to go into the venture capital space, right? Or in the public financing. Now very difficult. You have very little representation in that organization of people of color. So now you have a lack of familiarity. So the journey to start up on a capital intensive business, very difficult for founders of color, which is why you mostly see them start service-based businesses, which have a lower startup cost.
Yeah.
Well, the problem with a startup, a service-based business, has a very low exit value. It's people-based, it's time-based, it doesn't scale the same, so it doesn't have the exit liquidity value that a tech-based business was. So what happens is it's very difficult then, even if successful, which chances are low for all of us, right? But even if successful, the ability to create real wealth, not necessarily there in those type of businesses. So the disparities kind of lie all the way at the beginning to the end, right? And what we're trying to do is figure out, how do you create wealth? That's what startups and entrepreneurship is about. That's the lifeblood of this country, right? We were built on well, when you move past slavery, we're built on small businesses and the entrepreneurial spirit. Well, that's then what we're all striving for. So how do we make this process a little bit more equitable across the board?
And where, using a football analogy, Keenan, where kind of are we in your mind in the journey, like toward, getting true equality when it comes to opportunities, access to capital, networking for entrepreneurs of color? Are we at, in your mind, are we at the 1 yard line and we have 99 to go? Or, how do you kind of feel like we're evolving in that regard?
We're definitely in the first quarter. I can say it that way. But what's good about that is that means you're at least in the game, right? It's started. So I think a lot of progress has been made. I think the digital environment has helped because it is a lot easier now to start a business than it was, say, 20, 30, 40 years ago. So I do appreciate that. And I think there's a heightened sense of awareness on some of these issues, right, and the disparities that exist. A couple of things that I think we're trying to figure out, right? One is, what's the ROI of investing in an underrepresented founder? There's not a lot of data still there to show the success, right? So you want to invest you're trying to invest in a unicorn business, right? You want the Glossiers, the Ubers, the Facebooks of the world, which is amazing, but those are all white founders. So you're looking for those examples from a black founder so that you can reference. Well, the problem is they haven't had the ability to go through those numerous funding rounds of success to get to the unicorn status. So we have to approach that research a little bit different. And there's some amazing groups that are leading this work. But I think, one, we need to get the research. The other thing that I think we have to address is that we have to move this conversation from sympathy to empathy, right? Because the actions that you take when you're sympathetic to the struggles of a group are very different than when you're empathetic. And I think right now we're seeing a lot of responses from organizations that are based off of sympathy, like, oh man, I feel bad for what they're going through, instead of really addressing and putting themselves in that position and approaching it with a different set of urgency. And that's what we're needing. We're needing to see a bit more empathy in this space and in this conversation that's going on globally, right? Because the struggles of Black people are global. It's a global problem. That's why Black Lives Matter was a global process, right? I can talk about what's happened down in Colombia, down in Brazil. I can talk about what's happened in the Caribbean and going on in Haiti. I can speak to this from what happens in Europe all the way down to how the effects of colonialism in Africa. So the plight and the struggles are global in nature, and they have to then be met with a sense of empathy to then unpack the changes that are needed.
That's so well said, Keenan. The empathetic versus sympathetic approach too, so important. How have you seen that shift in, particularly over the past 4 or 5 months, just given everything that's happening in the world and, the social environment around us? Have you seen, have you seen more, or it sounds like it's a little slower than you'd like it to be, but have you seen a little bit more of a progression away from sympathy to empathy when it comes to businesses, entrepreneurs, investors, whomever looking to connect with this community?
I think so. I think we're moving in the right direction. That's why I say we're in the game, because we're able to have conversations like this, right? People are now talking. And if they're talking, it's a true dialogue where now you're listening actively, and you're not just trying to throw a solution out there to try to keep people quiet about it. It's starting with, hey, I don't actually have a solution yet, but I would like to entertain and engage in a conversation to learn so that we can collectively come up with a solution. From there, then it comes down to public accountability, right? That transparency. So what I'm looking for now is where, there's lots of companies, lots of organizations acknowledging the problems, acknowledging the challenges, openly trying to bring people into to the table to have a dialogue and come up with joint solutions. Well, then the last step for me is going to be transparency in, okay, how are we tracking our progress towards that, right? So I'm looking for those public scorecards to start coming out. P&G just recently put out and gave themselves a not such a great review, right? And I thought that was important for the industry to see, because Procter Gamble, frankly, has been pretty outspoken in terms of diversity scorecards from even back in early 2000s. So they're not new to this, but the fact that they still said, we're not doing great, we have to do a lot better, and we're going to share that. We're going to show publicly a bad score. That's courage, and I give them a lot of credit for that. Mark Pritchard is an amazing leader, and it's great that he did that.
No, that's a really important point. I think that underscores too, I think, the importance of large corporations being transparent, being more objective, being self-reflective and introspective when it comes to, looking in the mirror and really saying, hey, like, are we, going to be a part of the solution, or are we going to be words focused, or are we going to be action focused? And I think that is a good example of that. On that note too, Keenan, what's your take on just the overall response that Venture Noire and you've received from the corporate community? I know the Walton Family Foundation is behind Venture Noire. I think Spotify is, if I'm correct too. Just how have you what's been the overall response from corporate America when it comes to this initiative?
I think it's been extremely positive. One, because we're addressing something that's very early in the marketplace. I think there's a lot of resources that look like accelerators, right? They look like these incubators for people that have already crossed over the threshold of understanding what the business is to having a business and now looking to move faster. A lot of resources for the later stage groups. Not a lot of resources going towards the people that are curious about starting, right? And that's why it's important to note that Venture Noire is a venture catalyst organization. We exist to create more Black-owned, minority-owned businesses. That is our problem. The ones that are going to be great and scale and become unicorns, lots of resources and folks that will help, that are far more talented than I am, and they'll do that. But the early stages where people are like, wow, there hasn't been a resource group for that, and it's great to see that there is one. So a lot of the corporate companies, even groups like Johnson & Johnson, are trying to figure out how they can help and support, and not just with money, because money is one, but it's also time, right, and resources. When you have a level of expertise, right, it's something that you and your company has done with Venture Noire, saying, hey, we have expertise in this PR and comms arena. How can we lend that time and resource, right? You could easily write a check, but I think it was even more valuable to give your time and what you guys are doing. And so it's really exciting to see that type of support. And I think we're just scratching the surface, right? We're going to do a lot more. And I think this organization is going to exist around the country and eventually globally as we're looking to start creating this change.
Awesome. Keenan, just for the audience out there, myself included, by the way, just, I guess I would just ask you, how can we help? What can we be doing to be better corporate citizens and address, obviously, the super important, topic that's affecting everyone in the world right now?
I think the first step that I always look at when you want to create change, it's kind of take a look in the mirror and start to honestly assess what your environment is. Right? Is the environment that you can control, is that diverse? Is it inclusive? Is it equitable? Right? Just starting there with your actions. And if it's not, be vocal. Right? Be vocal about wanting to have a conversation and open to change. And what's important there is because we have to remove our ego out of this situation. Right? A lot of things people are feeling personally attacked And it's not about that. It's about acknowledging, hey, these things aren't right, right? And for whatever reason, right? It's not about getting to the source of it or answering off on why things are the way they are. It's about how can we shape things differently moving forward, and how can I be a part of that? And from a Venture Noire piece, I mean, we need help all around, right? We need help from funding. We need help from time and volunteers. So, please feel free. You can send me an email at keenan@venturenoir.org. We need all the help that we can get. We're just kicking off another fundraising campaign so that we can actually start to put more resources in these entrepreneurs. So that kicks off actually at the end of this month. So reach out to me anyway. I'll take all the help I can get. There's a lot of amazing folks that I know that are listening in and a part of this network and wanting to help. So we are truly a servant organization where we're seeking to just help out the public. And so we're open for all suggestions.
Awesome. Thanks, Keenan. And I'll make sure at the end of the clip, everybody gets your contact information and, understands exactly how they can get behind Venture Noire. I wanted to open up, we have something we do called 6 in 60, where we ask you 6 questions in 60 seconds. Also for our audience out there, once we get through this and a couple other questions for Keenan, we're going to turn it over to the audience for live Q&A. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to post them into the chat box, and I'll do my best to get to all of the questions. Keenan, just starting with our kind of rapid fire 660 here. Number one, crazy question. Let's get started with.
All right.
What is one word you would use to describe 2020 so far?
Battle.
Wow. Okay.
It's an absolute battle. It's a journey, right? There's ups and downs, and I think we're all having to find a way to be resilient and fight through.
Awesome. Number two, you mentioned earlier servant leadership and how important that's been on your entrepreneurial journey. When you look at a teammate, someone who, whether it's been at West Point or in your entrepreneurial journey or even growing up, when you look at someone you're teaming up with, what's one characteristic that you look for the most in that teammate?
Again, the characteristic I look for in them is passion. But I think in the balance of the relationship, it's trust. Because, you need to be able to rely on folks and that people are going to be accountable for the things that they sign up for. So that's what's huge for me.
Awesome. Keenan, just going back to the underrepresented community of entrepreneurs of color, let's just talk to us about what do you believe is the most important thing in your mind to bringing equal representation to the community of entrepreneurs of color?
That's a great question. I think what we have to bring, again, is empathy and humility. Again, because if you're humble, you know that you can't possibly have all the answers. And so you should actively seek diversity, right? You should seek those people with different thoughts, different points of views, different backgrounds and upbringings, because that's ultimately going to make the organization, the business, the thing that you're working on better. Great.
Thanks, Keenan. You talked about P&G earlier. You talked about J&J, I think, at one point. What, especially in 2020 and kind of the business environment that we're operating in today, what's one brand that you admire most and why?
Well, I mean, I admire a lot of great brands. I think some ones that come to mind. Obviously, I'm huge fans of the work that Nike does, both in and around the community. I think the type of brand that they've built. I really like where Google is going in terms of helping out a lot of other startups and entrepreneurs and reaching out in that community. And then I think from an organization standpoint, look, I'm a fan of J&J. I mean, obviously they've come in and it's public that they've supported, one of my businesses, but I think ultimately just their credo and their desire to address the health concerns of the public. I think, a great society is a healthy society. And their credo and everything they touch is about the aspect and the component of drawing it towards health. And I think it's a really brilliant mission that is something that I believe strongly in.
Awesome. And Keenan, all entrepreneurs, we learn so many lessons, we make so many mistakes along the way. Just share what's one lesson that you've learned in your entrepreneurial journey that you'd like to share with the audience.
I think one of the big things for me is preparing for things to go wrong. And it's hard because as an entrepreneur, we're optimistic in nature. But I think when you're at the formation standpoint, you want to cover off for when things go poorly. It took me some years to wrap my mind around that, but you want to get through those tough conversations with business partners, with investors early on. Get them out the way, right? Get uncomfortable, so that, as you're growing, you don't have to focus on that or worry about that, because that can become a real distraction later down the road.
Great. And just last question. So you're in New Orleans right now, I believe, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Give the audience, there's just so much talk about, cities and suburbs right now, just given the COVID environment we're living in. Give us one city that you're bullish on for the next, 2 to 3 years.
I'd say it's tough. I don't know if I could pick one city, but I'm really bullish on the Midwest. And it's because space is such a premium and we're able to work remote. So I think people are looking at where can they have a lot of land and security, and just a sense of nature. So, areas I particularly like, let's just go starting down. Houston, very bullish on that. I think they're doing some incredible things. I think around Little Rock and Bentonville and Fayetteville, Arkansas, they're doing some incredible work. I think Tulsa has done a fantastic job, extremely bullish on the things that they're doing in that area. So those are the ones that I'm really hot in. And then I think the second cities. So I'm a big fan of the second city strategy. So not New York City, but what's going on in Albany. I think they're doing some incredible things up there, all the way to the Ozarks, right? I think are places that I'm watching and tracking and looking at investing in myself.
Awesome. Great stuff, Keenan. All right. Before we turn it over to audience questions here, we do one thing for every one of our Outcomes and Omelettes episodes here called this is our N6A personality survey. And before we hire any N6A or any team member, they take a personality survey, and we've extracted 1 or 2 questions from the survey just to see what kind of N6A you would be. So the first question here is, actually, this is one of my favorite questions when it comes to the personality survey. If you were nominated for an Academy Award, which category would you want it to be in?
Ooh, Academy Award. So which one is that? That's movies?
Movies.
Movies, okay. I'd want to be something on like director, like best director.
I was going to go with supporting actor for you.
I wouldn't mind that one either. That's a competitive category too.
If I'm ever back in a movie, you have a blank check to be my director, whatever you want. I would rather have anybody direct my movie other than you. Maybe Scorsese.
I'll hold that to you. I'll hold you to that.
And one more on the personality survey. If your friends were to assign a Twitter hashtag to describe your personality, what would it be?
Twitter hashtag for me. I'm going to be cheesy and just go with what's on my Instagram now, but like the new madman. I think it's just because I'm trying to push in this space of advertising and marketing and just being so different but authentic in myself. So I feel like they would probably make fun of me and use something like that.
Awesome. All right. If you had 5 minutes or so, we have some questions from the audience I'd like to make sure we get to. The first comes from Valerie Ann Leary. How do you identify passion, Keenan, during an interview process? And how do you continue to encourage that passion in your teams, especially when you're faced with times of adversity?
Big thing I do, honestly, is I ask people what they love. So, usually people are thinking about, how to ask, and posture and position themselves to fit a role. But the question I usually ask is, what are they looking for from me? Because what I'm then doing is that tells me what they're passionate about, where they're focused on learning. And then I want to make sure that I build that into their work plan. So I try to nurture the personal passions, right? I want to pull out the selfishness early from folks and make sure that we're addressing that, because I want them to feel that the time that they're spending is not just about helping out the business, but they're elevating and advancing themselves in their careers.
Awesome. All right, the next one here comes in from Sean Hutchinson over at N6A. His question is, Keenan, can you talk a little bit about the importance of the concept of being a venture catalyst and what impact that has had on you personally?
For me, that concept comes from the notion of usually when people go through the venture process, it's a filtering process. They're trying to find the needle in the haystack, right? The unicorn. And what it is you start to then go through this ego-based structure of, okay, how can you position yourself up to be bigger than what you are? But a venture catalyst is about, I don't actually care where you are. I'm just trying to help move you along. So it allows us to approach things in a much more humble way and be open about the help that we need to get to the next step. My goal is to help you get to your next step, whatever that is, right? So I want to meet you where you are. And that's really, where we came up with the term venture catalyst.
Awesome. Next question is from Cameron Lisa. What advice do you have for entrepreneurs who might be hesitant to go all in on starting a business in the middle of the pandemic? And Cameron, who's listening to this, knows I'll always support her, whatever she does, but we need her at N6A. So if she has thoughts about doing something entrepreneurial, I might say now is not the time.
Look, that's amazing, Cameron. Careful there. No, but how I would answer that is, it's the saying that my dad always said. Scared money doesn't make money. So look, if you want to be an entrepreneur and you're passionate about something, you need to forego comfort. And if you're really, really built for it, you just go and do it. And that's the first step. That's where the courage comes in. And you know what? No matter what the outcome is, you'll be extremely happy in that process. Because part of being an entrepreneur is falling in love with the process and not necessarily the outcome, the end state of what you're doing.
Awesome. All right, we got two more. One comes from Aaron Pugh. Aaron's question for you, Keenan, is do you have any additional important leadership advice that would be helpful for young professionals, maybe something you wish you knew when you were just starting out in your career?
Honestly, I'm reluctant sometimes to give advice. I usually tell stories, and hopefully people can pull from that. But I think in this one, what I would say to anyone in this space is to keep fighting. Right, the moment you start and you go into being an entrepreneur, just know that you'll never give up. I think don't give yourself an out. Don't entertain that sense of comfort, right? That could look like another job or et cetera, or whatever, something could be. Make sure that you are 100% committed to continue to fight, right? And stay in this game, because that's what happens. The successful entrepreneurs are resilient, and they've gone through so many pivots and bumps and bruises. And sometimes they try to make it look like it was easy or sexy, but believe me, they're battle tested, every single one that we see. So just be prepared for that.
Yeah. Amen. And Trisha LaRocchia has a question for you here. How do you, and this is certainly apropos given the environment we're managing right now, Keenan, how do you motivate your teams during a true season or periods of stress?
Again, for me, it is stress usually is put on by yourself or who you think is, your boss, somebody that's judging. What I always do is I level the playing field that we all work for the vision, right? There's one kind of ultimate boss, right, over all of us, and that's the vision of the company and the people that we seek to serve. So as long as each and every day we're reminded that, hey, we're making a step towards that mission, right, and that vision, all is well with the world. So I try to de-stress the moment by simplifying the expectation, because the expectations are usually what cause that stress, and oftentimes they're not real.
Awesome. Great stuff, Keenan. One fun question to get us to finish us off here, I guess. Danielle Montana wants to know who you're picking on Sunday, the Rams or the Bills. We have this office pool at N6A, so I think she's trying to get an advantage over her coworkers.
Easiest question ever for me, being that I'm from LA. Then they're also playing in a stadium that has the name of a company that's ran by a West Pointer. The CMO is a former brand manager on Tide. I'm going Rams all day. That's easy. Easiest pick.
They're playing well too this season so far, I think.
Oh my goodness, unbelievable team. I'm just mad my season tickets I can't go yet. They haven't opened up things for us.
Listen, if anyone had pull at the stadium that I think would be able to get in on a VIP basis, it would be you.
Oh, I don't know about that, but hey, let's keep that into existence though.
Awesome. Hey, Keenan, I appreciate your time on behalf of everyone at N6A and all our customers, all our friends, everyone in our network. This was an amazing conversation. I appreciate your time and the relationship as always. So thank you. It means a lot to us.
No, thank you for having me. This was great. I appreciate it.
You got it, man. Appreciate you, Keenan.
All right. See ya.
Best, everybody. Be good.